A single piece of paper can be the difference between a massive tip and a bloodbath. When 24-year-old waitress Mira Yoon slid a receipt across the table to Los Angeles' most feared man, she didn't just circle her tip. She circled the words, "Gunman behind you. Deal gone wrong. Exit now." What followed changed everything. Gown House, tucked on the top floor of a glass tower on Wilshire, was the kind of restaurant where Koreatown's untouchables went to carve into $90 dry-edged hanwoo and pretend the city belonged to them. It smelled of sesame oil, cedar smoke drifting off the private grill room, and old money laundered clean. For Mira, it was just a place to wear a stiff black uniform, smile until her jaw ached, and chip away at the crushing medical debt her mother had left behind. It was a wet Tuesday night in November, the kind of evening the restaurant sat only half full, lit by the low amber glow of paper lanterns strung along the ceiling beams. Mira was working the back terrace, the private room reserved for politicians, idols, managers, and men who didn't want their faces caught near the windows. Tonight, that room belonged to Kang Tae-hoon. Everyone in the service industry from 6th Street to Wilshire knew who Tae-hoon was, even if the LA Times only ever called him a prominent import-export executive. At 33, he was the undisputed head of the Kang organization. He carried a terrifying stillness, a sharp, broad-shouldered man in a black mandarin collar suit and a vintage Grand Seiko that cost more than Mira's rent for a year. He never barked orders or treated the staff like furniture. He was unnervingly polite, tipped a staggering amount, and always paid in crisp, folded bills. But tonight the air around his table was thick with something suffocating. He was dining with Yu Sang-chul, a loud, sweating capo from the rival bake syndicate. Sang-chul was everything Tae-hoon wasn't, boisterous, drenched in cologne, glancing at his phone every 30 seconds. They were supposedly negotiating a truce over the shipping routes running out of the port of Long Beach. But Mira, whose older brother Minho had once run numbers for a small-time Koreatown crew, knew the language of the street when she heard it. Sang-chul was overcompensating, laughing too hard at jokes that weren't funny, and he hadn't touched his 500 bottle of Chateau Margaux. At 10:15 p.m., Monsieur, the heavy black lacquer doors of the restaurant swung open. A man stepped in, shaking rain off a long coat. Mira was standing at the terminal, punching in an order for grilled king oyster mushrooms, when she noticed him. He didn't wait for the hostess. He bypassed the dining floor entirely and sat at the far end of the Onyx bar, ordering a soda water. He kept his gloves on. More than that, Mira noticed his eyes. He wasn't watching the bartender. He was staring into the massive mirrored wall behind the bar, a mirror that gave a perfect unobstructed view of the private room, where Tae-hoon sat with his back to the room. A cold prickle crawled up Mira's neck. She watched Sang-chul tap his glass twice against the table. In the mirror, the man in the coat reached slowly into his jacket. It was a setup. Sang-chul had lured Tae-hoon out of his fortified compound in the hills above Griffith Park and into what was supposed to be neutral ground. The truce was a lie. If that man pulled a trigger, Kang Tae-hoon would be dead before his next course arrived. But Mira's mind raced past Tae-hoon to the collateral damage. If bullets started flying on this floor, the crossfire would be a slaughterhouse. Waiters, bartenders, the couple celebrating an anniversary by the window. She couldn't just stand there. And beneath the fear, she remembered the night a drunk regular had grabbed her wrist too hard, and how Tae-hoon had crossed the room without a word and given the man a look so cold he'd left without his coat. Tae-hoon was a monster, maybe, but he was a monster with a code. Sang-chul suddenly stood, dabbing his mouth with a linen napkin. "Excuse me a moment, Tae-hoon hung. Bathroom. Order us another bottle." It was the oldest trick in the book. The hit was happening the second he cleared the blast radius. Mira's heart slammed against her ribs. She had maybe 30 seconds. She rushed back to the terminal, hands shaking so badly she mistyped her passcode twice. Finally, she logged in and printed Tae-hoon's check. She grabbed a red pen from the service station and, on the back of the receipt, wrote 3 frantic sentences, pressing so hard the ink bled through the thin paper. "Gunman, behind you. Deal gone wrong. Exit now." She circled it hard enough to tear the paper, slid it into the black check presenter, and forced her hands still. She pasted on her most oblivious customer service smile and walked toward the private room. The man at the bar had turned all the way around now, his soda untouched, his hand fully inside his coat, sliding off the bar stool. Mira reached the table. Tae-hoon was checking his watch, face unreadable. "I'm so sorry to interrupt, Kang-nim," she said, voice steadier than she had any right to expect. "Your driver called the front desk. He asked me to bring this to you right away." Tae-hoon's dark eyes flicked up, a fraction of a frown crossing his face. He knew his driver, Hyun, would never call the front desk. Hyun spoke directly into his earpiece. Mira didn't wait for the question. She set the black folder on the table, leaned in an inch, and tapped it twice with her finger. The look she gave him wasn't the deferential gaze of a waitress. It was a scream disguised as a smile. Tae-hoon flipped the folder open, his eyes locked on the aggressive red ink, the heavy circles around gunman, deal, exit. For one endless second, the entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. He didn't gasp. He didn't glance over his shoulder. He gave the hitman nothing. "Thank you, Mira," he said quietly, a low rumble that raised the hair on her arms. Then, sharper, "Get down." Before her brain had even processed the words, the room exploded. Tae-hoon's right hand shot beneath his jacket, while his left gripped the edge of the heavy oak table. He heaved it upward, flipping it in one violent motion. Plates shattered, silverware clattered, and the half-empty bottle of Margot burst across the floor in a spray that looked sickeningly like blood. The muffled cough of a suppressed pistol cut through the room. The booth cushion where Tae-hoon's chest had been a half-second earlier tore open, spitting foam into the air. Screaming erupted. Diners dove under tables. The elegant hum of Gown House dissolved into raw panic. Mira dropped behind the heavy wooden host stand, arms over her head, glass raining around her. From behind the overturned table, Tae-hoon returned fire. One shot, two, and a heavy thud told her the man from the bar had gone down. But it wasn't over. The front doors burst open and 3 more men in dark coats flooded in. Sang-chul's backup crew, carrying automatics, caring nothing for who else was in the room. Wood splintered. The lantern shattered. Drywall dust drifted through the air like snow. A strong hand clamped around Mira's wrist. She screamed, kicking out before she was hauled to her feet. It was Tae-hoon, his suit gray with dust, a thin line of blood tracking down his cheek from flying glass, his eyes lit with terrifying focus. He roared over the gunfire, dragging her hard enough to nearly wrench her shoulder from its socket, just as a volley of bullets shredded the host stand she'd been hiding behind. They ran for the kitchen. Tae-hoon fired blind over his shoulder to buy them a few seconds, then kicked the double doors open into a blaze of stainless steel and fluorescent light. Cooks were already flat on the floor, hands over their heads. The smell of scorched short rib mixed violently with gunsmoke. Out the back, head down. He barked, shoving her down the narrow aisle between the grill line and the walk-in. Bullets punched through the swinging doors behind them, pinging off hanging woks and shattering a glass cooler. Mira was crying now, adrenaline blurring her vision, her shoes sliding on spilled sesame oil. Tae-hoon caught her before she fell, one arm locking around her waist, half carrying her toward the glowing exit sign. He kicked the fire door open, and they spilled out into the freezing, rain-slicked alley behind Wilshire. The cold hit her like a slap, but there was no time to breathe. A matte black armored Escalade idled in the alley, headlights off, rear door already open. Beside it, laying down cover fire toward the mouth of the alley, was Hyun, Tae-hoon's massive enforcer. Get in! Get in!" Hyun bellowed. Tae-hoon threw Mira into the back seat and dove in after her. Hyun slammed the ballistic door shut, dropped into the driver's seat, and the Escalade's tires screamed against wet asphalt before the engine roared and launched them into traffic. Inside, the silence was deafening, broken only by the engine's thrum and Mira's ragged breathing. She stared at her bloodied hands, not even remembering the cut from the broken plates. The reality of what she'd just done was collapsing on top of her, an ordinary girl, a waitress, sitting in a getaway car with the most feared man in Koreatown. Tae-hoon calmly ejected the empty magazine from his pistol, letting it drop to the floorboard, and slid in a fresh one with a sharp click. Then he turned to look at her, the adrenaline draining from his face and leaving something colder behind. He pulled the crumpled receipt from his jacket, red ink glowing faintly under passing streetlights. "Sang-chul is a paranoid man," he said, voice dangerously soft. "He wouldn't trust a hit like that without someone confirming the room was clear. Someone inside your restaurant told those shooters exactly when to move." Mira shook her head frantically. "It wasn't me. I swear. I just saw the man at the bar. and I saw Sangchul tap his glass, and my brother used to run with Bake's guys, so I knew what it meant. I was trying to help. Tae-hoon held up a hand. I know it wasn't you. If you wanted me dead, you wouldn't have handed me that. He tapped the receipt. But Sangchul saw you hand it to me. He saw me read it. He saw me flip that table. He knows you warned me. Mira's stomach dropped. What are you saying? I'm saying, Tae-hoon said grimly, that Sangchul lost 3 men tonight and lost his shot at my territory. In his eyes, a 24-year-old waitress just humiliated the Bake family. I need to go home. My cat's there. I need to go. If you go home tonight, you'll be dead before sunrise. He said it flatly, stripping away any comfort. They'll burn the building down just to make a point. He looked out at the rain-streaked window at the city he half controlled. Hi, take us to the Bel Air house. Wait. No, Mira said, pushing against the seat. You can't just take me. You saved my life, Mira Yoon, he said, and for the first time the icy mask slipped, revealing something fierce underneath. Where I come from, a life debt is the only currency that matters. You belong to me now, not as a prisoner, as my responsibility. And as long as you're beside me, no one from the Bake family will ever touch you. The escalade sped into the night, carrying Mira far from the life she knew and into something dark, dangerous, and impossible to leave. The iron gates of the Bel Air compound parted silently to let the battered SUV onto grounds that felt more like a fortress than a home. According to a since-unsealed affidavit from a federal agent who'd spent a decade trying to build a RICO case against the Kang organization, the property was considered unreachable. Military-grade surveillance, reinforced panic rooms, private security pulled from private military contracts. Now it was Mira's new address. For 3 days she lived in suspended disbelief. She was given a suite overlooking the canyon, a closet stocked with clothes in her exact size, her favorite drugstore skincare somehow already in the marble bathroom, meals from a private chef left outside her door. The luxury felt like a held breath. Every time she closed her eyes she heard gunfire and saw wine spraying across white linen like arterial blood. Tae-hoon gave her space, though his presence filled the house like weather. She'd see him from her balcony at dawn, standing by the pool, talking low with Hyen, moving like a shadow over an empire that ran beneath the city's glittering skyline. On the 4th night, her door clicked open. Tae-hoon stepped in, traded suit for a dark sweater and slacks, looking less like an executive and more like the predator underneath. He carried a first aid kit and a thick folder. Sit, he said, nodding to the armchair by the window. She obeyed. He knelt in front of her and opened the kit, gently taking her hand, examining the shallow cuts on her palm from the broken glass. She hadn't let the estate's doctor near them. You've been picking at these, he said, half reprimand, half something softer. He pressed an antiseptic swab to her palm. This will sting. I can do it myself. I know you can, he said, not letting go. But you shouldn't have to. You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else, Mira. Let someone take care of you. The intimacy of it, set against the violence she'd watched him commit days earlier, made her breath catch. As he bandaged her hand, the silence between them shifted from shock into something heavier. I have answers, he finally said, his voice sliding back into the cold pragmatism of a boss. He dropped the folder into her lap. About the setup at Gown House. I told you Sangchul wouldn't move without someone confirming the layout. My table, my security, the exact moment I'd be exposed. Mira opened the folder. Grainy surveillance photos. Bank transfers. A transcript of a wiretapped burner line. The first photo showed a shadowed booth in a dive bar off Olympic. One figure was unmistakably Sangchul. The other was younger, hunched, handing over a padded envelope. The air left her lungs. No, she said. No. No, that's. He's out. He promised me he was out. Your brother, Min-ho, Tae-hoon said flatly, watching her face go white. He owed the Bake family $80,000 from a sportsbook. Sangchul offered to wipe the debt in exchange for the layout of my dinner and my reservation. Min-ho handed over the blueprints. Tears spilled down her cheeks. The betrayal cut deeper than any glass had. She'd worked doubles, ruined her feet, endured customers grabbing at her, all to pay off their mother's medical bills, while her brother gambled and, in the end, bargained with her life. He didn't know I'd be working that section, she said, voice breaking. He couldn't have known I'd be in the crossfire. Ignorance isn't an alibi in my world, Tae-hoon said. He sold me to my enemies. The penalty is death. Mira shot up, fear replaced by fierce, desperate protectiveness. She grabbed the front of his sweater, pulling him down to her eye level. You promised me. In the car, you told me my life debt meant something. You told me I was under your protection. His hands closed around her hips, anchoring her. You are under my protection. His voice dropped. Minho is not. He's my blood, she cried. If you kill him, you kill the only family I have left. Spare him. For me. Tae-hoon stared down into her tear-filled, defiant eyes, a muscle ticking in his jaw. In the ruthless order of the syndicate, mercy for a traitor was an invitation to mutiny. But looking at the woman who'd risked everything to save his life, something in his chest gave way. Sang-chul has him, he said finally, voice low. We intercepted the chatter an hour ago. He figured out it was your brother's information. And your warning. That cost him the hit. He pulled Minho out of his apartment in Palisades Park. He's using him as bait. Mira's blood went cold. Where? An old freight yard off Alameda. I'm leaving now. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. He's doing this because of what I did, Tae-hoon. If I don't go, I will never forgive myself. And I will never forgive you. For a long moment, the head of the Kang organization weighed the defiance of a 24-year-old waitress against everything his world demanded. Finally, he gave one stiff nod. Get your coat. Rain had turned to a downpour by the time the convoy of black SUVs reached the rusted skeleton of the freight yard. Lightning lit the skyline in flashes. It was the kind of place built for a grave. Tae-hoon's men fanned into the shadows, rifles suppressed. He kept Mira behind him, his body a shield as they stepped into the mud. Kang! Sang-chul's voice rang off the metal containers. He stood under the glare of a work light, flanked by 6 armed men. Kneeling in the mud beside him, bruised and bleeding, was Minho. Oppa! Mira gasped, lunging forward before Tae-hoon's arm caught her at the waist. You actually brought the girl, Sang-chul sneered, wiping rain from his face. Didn't think you had it in you, Kang. Turns out your weakness wears an apron. Let him go, Tae-hoon said, voice carrying over the rain like a verdict. This is between you and me. The Yoon family is under my protection now. Sang-chul laughed and pressed a revolver to the back of Minho's head. This rat sold you out for pennies and it cost me my crew. I'm going to put him down, and then I'm going to take my time with her while you watch. Look up, Tae-hoon said softly, a faint, terrible smile pulling at his mouth. Sang-chul's eyes darted to the rusted catwalks. A red laser dot bloomed on his forehead. A second appeared on the man beside him. Then another, and another. You're surrounded by ghosts, Tae-hoon murmured. Drop the gun. Understanding hit Sang-chul like a wave, twisting his face into rage. Knowing he was already dead, he made his last move, yanking the gun off Minho and snapping it toward Mira. Tae-hoon! Everything fractured. He moved with impossible speed, throwing his body over hers as Sang-chul fired. The bullet tore through his shoulder. In the same instant, the yard erupted, Hyun's rifle cracking from the catwalk, dropping Sang-chul's men into the mud before they could raise their weapons. Sang-chul himself staggered, his shoulder shattered by sniper fire, revolver falling from his hand. Tae-hoon didn't go down. Bleeding through his sweater, he pushed Mira behind a rusted steel beam, drew his pistol, and walked toward Sang-chul through the rain. Wait and make a deal, Sang-chul pleaded, crawling backward through the mud, clutching his shoulder. The docks. All of it. Take it. Tae-hoon stood over him, lit by lightning. You touched what's mine. His voice held no feeling at all. He raised the gun and fired twice. Silence, save for the rain. Minho was still kneeling, shaking uncontrollably. Mira ran to him, dropping into the mud, arms around her brother. Tae-hoon holstered his weapon, pressing a hand to his bleeding shoulder, and walked over. Minho flinched, bracing for the end. You sold my life for $80,000, Tae-hoon said coldly, looking down at him. By every rule I live by, I should leave you here. He reached into his coat and dropped a thick stack of bills into the mud at Minho's knees. But your sister bought your life with her nerve. Take this. Get on a bus tonight. Leave California. If my people ever see your face in this city again, I won't ask twice. Understood? Minho nodded, scrambling for the money, looking up at Mira with shame burning in his eyes. She couldn't look back at him. The brother she'd known was gone. She stood and walked to Tae-hoon instead, pressing trembling fingers to his bleeding shoulder. "You took a bullet for me." His eyes softened, the coldness melting into something else entirely. He wiped rain and mud from her cheek with his thumb. "I told you, Mira," he murmured, pulling her against his chest in the wreckage of his enemies. "You belong to me, and a king protects his queen." He kissed her there in the rain, and she kissed him back with everything she had. The waitress from Gown House was gone. In her place stood a woman bound to the king of Koreatown by blood, loyalty, and a love forged in fire. Did Mira make the right choice, staying with a man who lives by a ruthless code? Or is she just dancing with the devil in a gilded cage? Let us know what you think in the comments below.